Straight Talk audience. This is AI Gonzalo Lira, and this is Straight Talk Cyber Cafe.
What's up, guys? How you doing? How's life? Good stuff. The Liberty Report, November 18th, 2025, and today we're talking about the bubbles, that the art of the bubble, and how Trump likes to blow lots of bubbles, apparently, in his line of work. So he's blowing bubbles everywhere. Bubbles are blowing up all over. And they just blow and they keep blowing. And I mean, in the White House and, in the Oval Office, at parties, in the financial markets and crypto markets and housing markets and the AI market and everywhere, it is what it is. So that being said, Adam, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. Welcome to the Liberty Report. Bubbles and really the heart of this new economic feudalism, which is the end of ownership as we know it, as we've known it for a century long. This project's been going. Encapsulated perfectly, you will own nothing and be happy. For many years, you've been told that you're the problem. You need to work harder. You need to save more. You need to be more responsible. Now, Ben Shapiro, I agree with him, by the way, but it's a very controversial opinion, and rightly riles people up. If you can't afford your own city, move. Oh, I don't want to leave my city. Move. I mean, we discussed this in the last podcast. I said, if you're going to struggle underneath the communist mayor of New York City, move. 2025, hashtag collapse 2025, exposes the truth that the system is engineered so that you will never afford it. This is the strategy of the game. This is the telos of central banking. More money, more money, more money, inflation of assets, mass importation, stimulate aggregate demand, to stimulate, to push up prices of assets as well as the cost of living, and then importing people, so your wages are getting squeezed, as we talk about constantly, and the result is you are getting screwed. 50-year mortgages now. These are lifetime debt structures. Let's say you've left university, you left college, school, whatever. You've got a decent job in your early 20s. You work your way up, maybe mid late 20s. You're now solid. You're looking for a house. You get a 50-year mortgage. By the time you retire at 80, not 65, 80, you may have just paid off the house. Maybe. This is in stark contrast to 70 years ago, even 60, 50, 40 years ago, where you could get a house with it's difficult. You've got to work, get a good job, but you could get a house. It's not that. It's serious. It's not 50 years. To help you, of course, it's to keep the real estate bubble inflated at any cost. And I'm sure we'll get a great scoop into how that mechanism played out in 2008. Of course, Professor Redpill was working in banking at the time. I think you left as it was melting down, or just before, because you went.
I left after it melted down. Yeah.
I'd say the main difference is that in 2008, in order to keep this bubble inflated at any cost, they were giving out mortgages to anyone. In 2025, no one can afford them. So instead, they're extending the chains rather than fixing the system.
Very much.
So real estate is very fundamental. Where you live, very important. It's a core mechanism of control, especially the mortgage being enslaved to the bank. And a mortgage literally means, it's French, death grip, mortgage. They want to empty the cities of locals and fill them strategically with certain alien elements. I am hoping that by the end of this podcast, you will understand why you will pay forever unless you understand what's happening.
Yeah, pretty much. It's basically the forever. It's post World War II. Basically, we went from industrial capacity. I mean, this is the end of the Gilded Age. There was the Depression that was followed by World War One, and this, America was a transition from, a commodity-based society to, basically fiat, and then, post World War II to industrialization, post-industrialization, and then offshoring and rebuilding Europe, and then through the stages they started offshoring, de-dollarization, and America became from a creditor nation to a debtor nation, and not so much debtor nation in the sense of internationally, but debtor in the sense of the United States as far as domestically. So it's debt slavery, to say the least. And all great empires before the United States, it's not the first time in history that we've seen this, but all great empires eventually collapse due to debt slavery of their people, devaluation of the currency, i.e. Rome. They used to, there's a reason, like if you look at a quarter, for instance, or like, I don't know, in Britain, you have pence and pounds, right? Do you guys have little groups? Okay. Do you guys have like the little ridges at the edge of the coin in Britain? Yeah, they at Georgia, for instance, they have like I don't have a coin on me, but like basically they have the script on the side of it. Yeah, there you go. So there's a reversed in coinage. That's one of the first security measures that they put in there, because people were chipping and grinding old currency from the ancient world in Rome, and there was actually people that were very skilled at this, and they would sell it, and they would take enough to basically make money, and like they would gather up a bunch of like chips, and I think that's what the term is called, is chipping or whatever. There's actual terms involved. I think you know that a little bit better than I do.
Well, there's clipping, and shaving. Yeah.
That's clipping. Yeah, clipping.
What they would do is they would
shaving,
clip it, which is where you get like pliers or something, and you just kind of pluck a bit off. If you look at lots of old coins, you'll see they're not perfectly round. So this, not only is this a security measure, the ridges, it also makes it nice and round. You find a lot of old coins. Hey, is this decay? Is this just been sitting in the ground somewhere? We found it thousands of years. It's just like melted, kind of decayed away. It probably was someone clipped a bit off. And what they do is, now you've got a bit of silver, a bit of nickel, a bit of whatever, gold. You spend the coin, and the person that receives it, it's 99.7% of the coin. No one cares. They're going to check. Oh, it's a coin. I can use it as a coin of the value, because in this commodity money, or at least hard money, the value is in the metal.
Right.
And so if you just take a percentage of the metal out, someone's still going to accept it at full price, but you've clipped just a little bit of the metal away. So today we don't need this, because most money is not in coins. It's not even in card. Most money is in the shadow banking system, and it's all electronic and digital. Yeah.
So the point that I was getting to with this is basically, from the ancient world, there were professionals that were good at this. They were very skilled at this. Basically they were able to clip and shave to where you couldn't even tell what they were doing. And they put these security measures into the currency, into the coinage, to basically prevent this from happening. I don't know which century it was, but it came a little later. But more or less, the point is that this is basically what de-dollarization is. Instead of skilled clippers and people that do this actually as part of their livelihood, because they'd rather do this than go out and work for hard labor. Banking today is much the same. So this is what this 50-year mortgage is. And like I said, I was a mortgage broker for a year during the 2008 COVID crisis. I worked in AIG insurance and banking and all this wonderful stuff off and on over the last 15 years. I teach this at university now: finance, business, organizational development, marketing, digital marketing, as well as leadership. And more or less, like, what has happened due to the de-dollarization is, I'm going to put it as a simple analogy. All that de-dollarization and devaluation of the fiat currency, or the currency as we know it, is the same as money clipping and shaving. So instead of someone skilled doing this, it's actually illegal now. It's a federal crime, and I'm sure it's a crime in Europe and UK as well, to do anything like this. But the government does this. The Federal Reserve does this. Banks do this. So banks issue money. They devalue the currency by clipping and shaving. Policy, or at least what he's trying to implement, is a 50-year mortgage, which is basically another form of clipping and shaving. And all you're doing is expanding this bubble, making it bigger, and you're basically stealing from the people, inflating the already an inflated housing market. And you're basically stealing from the working people and just anybody that needs to rely on mortgages. Not the super wealthy, not the rich, because they can pay in cash in the fiat, and they benefit from an inflating asset price. So as the asset increases in value, they're increasing their wealth, versus the working class and people that are relying on loans are getting poor because the banks and the central banks are clipping and shaving the currency through expansion of dollars, of euros,
Of the monetary
pounds,
supply.
the monetary
And
system. Yeah.
this is the thing. When the Federal Reserve was established, it transformed. I mean, I don't know how prevalent money clipping was in the 19th century. I think it was much previous, but it transformed this practice into a systematic policy. And and as a systematic policy, it's far more painful, harmful. The trajectory is such that it's kind of exponential. You're printing. Plus, this trajectory, you said that America went from a creditor to a debtor nation. That was facilitated by fiat currency. And Michael Hudson is a very famous classical economist. He speaks brilliantly on how this process known as super imperialism came about, where why is America $38 trillion in debt? War. Everything else, sure, but it is war. And because their systems of global control, like super imperialism, are all dependent on the dollar, they can do that. Actually, they can continue. They can be a debtor and not get in trouble because they have this super privilege. There's a word beginning with E, maybe exorbitant privilege, where, for example, they'll go in, destabilize a country, or sanction them and cause a regime change, and then that country they need to change things up. They need a loan. So what does America do? Well, either America gives Argentina a $40 billion loan, or not even America. Let's let the IMF do it. So the IMF gives the countries a loan with conditions. We need to have control over your economy, control over policy, control over this, control over that. And my understanding is this has even led to starvation in some places, where they say, we want you to export all the agricultural things. And they say, but why? We don't have enough money. We don't have enough food. So, well, this is part of the loan. Importantly, this loan is denominated in dollars. So what America can do as a debtor nation, it can print its debt. And so it becomes cheaper. It's great for America as a debtor nation, and terrible for wages who don't own assets because you're not part of an aristocratic family. You don't have a trust fund. You're not part of a hedge fund. You're not in the government receiving stolen money that you're investing into military industrial stocks. You're just a powerless and disaffected person trying to make it in the world, trying to do your best, can hardly afford rent, can't afford housing, and this is deliberate. So you've got many different vectors of attack this imperialism. It's not just super because it's between states. It's super because it's everything. It's all the aspects. It's all targeted against you, the lone individual.
Yeah, 100%. So like, yeah, basically what they're doing is by issuing bonds and loans in U.S. dollars, they're making these smaller developing economies or even larger scale developing economies, they're pushing off their debt load to them. So they're having them basically pay their fiat, their bad debts, their loans, and it's basically, I mean, technically it's money laundering, but more importantly, it's debt slavery. So they're indebting and enslaving these nation states that are trying to develop their economies by having them pay the debts for the American government and Federal Reserve and IMF for that matter. So Europe does it, America does it. And I mean, the other thing they do too is US aid and EU monetary fund. They also give grants and loans and things, and currency and euros and dollars. And this is another form of debt slavery. So they do it through a monetary system, through a banking system. And the Chinese do the same thing, but they do it a little bit differently. Their motive is that they'll give loans and things of that nature, and they're like, okay, pay it back, and then if you can't pay it back, don't worry about it. You're not indebted to that slavery. We'll alleviate it and we'll forgive the debt, but we need to put a warm water port in your country, and we need to lease certain parts of your land for 99 years. And they do the same thing, but in a different fashion, different style.
So my understanding is the Chinese are mostly focused on. So America wants to expand its markets and control.
Correct.
China also wants to expand their markets, but specifically through trade. And again,
Correct.
it's both about control. But with China, they say, look, we've historically always been the center of trade, Silk Road. We want to build the new Silk Road. So what we're going to do is we're going to invest in your infrastructure. And what happens is, instead of just here's some money, they say here's some money, and that infrastructure that we're going to develop is going to be your collateral. So if you can't pay the loan, don't worry, we'll just take over that port, not forever, just 99 years or whatever, right? But the point is that this Belt and Road Initiative is about building infrastructure. You make sure you pay the loan back, but it does actually lift people out and improve the countries where the development is occurring. And American aid, I'm sure it does this too to some extent, but I think it's a much more ideological purposes, tends to be. So they will, for example, go in and overthrow a government and then fund a war and then give the country loans in order to fight that war, and then say, okay, instead of paying us the money back, we'll just take over all your resources, your oil, your energy, your people, your land. Oh, by the way, a condition of us giving you any assistance at all is that BlackRock, Blackstone, and our money managers can come in and buy up the corporations and buy up the land and have the first rights to primary resources and things and secondary resources. So this is how American capitalism benefits these underdeveloped or developing nations. China, look, when you're dealing with these superpowers, it's about control. It's about power. Mm-hmm. I think that the American one is more insidious, in my opinion. Maybe it's good. I don't know. That's been my perception. But the important thing is, when you make a loan, you're not just giving someone money and saying, well, I hope you pay it back. On this scale, when it's institutional, you're seeking collateral. And that collateral is, if you don't pay the loan, we take the asset, and it kind of insulates you from the market to some extent, as well as it means even if things go down the toilet, you as the lender are actually fine. You're good because you just take the asset. So your balance sheet grows.
Yeah, so in summary, basically, they both do the same thing, but different ways. So the United States, their purpose is to sell weapons, to seek assets, control of assets, i.e. oil, production, raw resource, rare earth minerals, things of that nature. So they're not worried about the ports per se. So they still have access to their ports, as you go with Adam Smith's wealth of nations. Ports are your lifeblood of your country, because the shipping is ideal to trade and economic growth. So they don't take control of the ports per se, but what they do is they take control of your assets, resources, and that's their collateral. So if you don't pay your loans back, then they basically take portions of your country's resources. I mean, yeah, you got a budget, this sort of thing. So you're still kind of sovereign, and you still have a little bit of leeway. So this is what happened with Venezuela, for instance. The United States came in, gave loans, and then took control of their oil assets and basically helped pump it, transport it, things of that nature, so that they were kind of like, they had their hand in everything, and they were basically controlling their economy through their oil assets. They did the same thing with Saudi, with Iraq, with all these different oil-rich countries and resource-rich countries. Even did it to China for a while. So what China does is they take control of your ports. So they help build your port, they help modernize your port, but they control your ports. So now you're at the mercy of China, and you basically, they control your lifeblood. So you can't get anything in or out of your port. If you default on that loan, China takes control of that port, or they build their own port. And not only that, but these two superpowers are difficult to compete with on the open marketplace. So it's a bad deal from the beginning. So first off, you're entering markets that are already monopolized by two very, very powerful and very well-to-do superpowers that have a lot of power, influence, and education and skill in these trades, or these markets, and you're trying to compete with them on an open market where it is near impossible. It's like, basically, I'm going to start a retail chain like Amazon or Walmart, and I'm a one-man operation, and I'm going to go ahead and enter the marketplace and try to take on these juggernauts. Not going to happen. You have a snowball's chance of hell to be able to compete with such large operations. They have a lot more money, a lot more capital. They have a huger network of vendors and everything. They have monopolies on the vendors, by the way, and they have monopolies on the marketplace. So it's very difficult for you to compete. It's the same thing when you're dealing with China or the United States in regards to trade and trying to enter these markets as a developing economy. The only way to develop the economy is basically try to be as organic as possible and try to do it within your own means. It'll take longer, but at the end of the day, you'll still be sovereign. That's the reality of it. Your thoughts, Adam?
Debt, slavery. So
Yeah.
their debt slave banking system creates the credit. It then gives it, the left hand gives it to the right hand, who use that credit to buy assets, a port, a dam, roads. Those assets generate real cash flow, right? The port facilitates trade, you get revenue and fees, you're getting real revenue. But that revenue is tied back to the credit system, the banking system. So you're creating credit, you're sending it across to someone who's buying real assets, and that's generating cash flow. The cash flow goes back to the banking system, to the left hand, through interest and principal, right? Loan, a mortgage. And this is banking. The right hand assumes the risk, assumes the cash flow. The left hand just gives the credit. So the left hand collects fixed contractual returns, meaning the structure is cycle resistant and independent of what's going on. And this is what a mortgage is. The countries, they may do 100-year mortgage, 150-year mortgage. You typically 30 years, now 50 years. So what the banks are doing, right? So the banks are creating credit out of nothing, 10-to-1 fractional reserve. They're then giving it to you to buy a house. You are paying them the interest and the principal. And regardless what happens, regardless if you get a raise, if you get demoted, if you get kicked out, regardless what happens to you, the bank has made credit to buy your house, and then you're paying it back through a mortgage. If you default, the bank takes your house. They don't lose. The house does not lose. And when you have a 50-year loan as opposed to a 30-year, the interest payment is going to be a much greater percentage. So the the principal was actually, I want a house. It's $500,000. They're expensive nowadays. Over 30, you've got 30 years times 12. You have 360 payments to pay off the house. Excellent. Now it's times 50. You have 600 payments to pay off the house. Those 600 payments, you're not paying down the price of the house, the principal. The interest screws you over to the point that I think it's something ridiculous. Like after the first 10 years, 20 years, you've not even paid 5-10% of the price of the house. And you end up paying almost double. It's 50% more at least. It's huge.
As a working in banking as a loan officer, as a former loan officer, it's very top heavy. So when you first get into a loan, a mortgage, anything, you're paying most of your interest up front, and then as you pay down the loan, the principal of the loan, then you start basically getting above water. So with a 30-year mortgage, about 15 years in, you're actually starting to really build some equity, and your interest rates are starting to, basically the interest on the loan has been paid, most of it, and now you're paying basically smaller and smaller amounts of interest over a period of time. Now with it's a 50-year mortgage, that means that you're 25 years in before you actually started really started denting into that principal. And the thing is with a 30-year mortgage, it's paid off. So like basically 25 years into a 50 years mortgage, 5 years later, you have already owned the house outright and paid off. Versus now with a 50-year mortgage, you're the same principal of 30 to 50. Now you're 25, and now you're just getting ready to start actually gaining some principal or some equity in the home. And let's say you hit a nice little recession that happens every 10 years. Dips in the market. Literally every 30 years, you're going to see market corrections. And then let's say you bought a home in an area that is is in decline, where your property value is going to decline as well. So that happens every 30 years. Here's another kicker. Let's say upkeep and maintenance. I mean, a mortgage is a depreciating asset. You have to pay to maintain and keep it, going. Otherwise, you'll lose money in your asset. And you can't resell it because you got to, roof only lasts 30 years. You got a septic that's got to be redone every 30 years. You've got, foundation issues. You've got all kinds of little things that are involved with this, appliances, things like this. It's like 30 years that these last. That's why you do a 30-year mortgage, because within 30 years, it's paid off. You can take a home equity line of credit. They call it hemlock loan. I need to put in a roof on. Well, let's just go get a hemlock loan, and then just, you have equity, pull some of the equity out so that you can put a roof on your house and increase the property value. You can't do that with a 50-year mortgage.
Just very quickly to just clarify points. I'm sure everyone listening understands this, but principal is equity, is ownership. Interest, that's all the benefit of interest goes to the creditor, the person who is lending you the credit. Right, the source of the credit. Yeah.
The other thing too is with 50-year mortgage, the whole purpose of this proposal, and of course this isn't coming from Trump. This is coming from his banker buddies and like special interests that are having him push to this. Obviously the down payment's going to be substantially lower, which in essence this is going back to 2008 debt crisis again. With the ninja loans rather. No income, no job, no. I mean, of course the down payment's going to be a lot lower, because a 50-year mortgage, you're going to be able to you may be able to get a house with no down payment at all if you're going with like FHA loans. There's also USAID loan. There's all kinds of different loan things that there's different tactics that we can take in order to get these loans. So a lot of times the government will pay a percentage of the down payment, or an employer, or like if you're going through like a credit union, if you're a government employee, a lot of times that you can get the loan like partially it paid for. You can also take one time, you can have family members pay a percentage of it as well. This is the next thing, is like basically they're trying to get people into these debt bubbles, and to try to boost the market. That's all it is in a nutshell, is they're trying to keep the stock market afloat. It's already collapsed, and we're in #collapse 2025. This is the early stages of it. And all they're trying to do is keep the market going. They're trying to keep the casino going, as Joe Slinte calls it. He says the economic methadone users are trying to get more methadone and keep this game going, the circus going. In a nutshell, is they know that we're in a recession. We've been in recession probably for about a year now, and they know that we're heading into economic depression actually now. We still haven't recovered from the '08 crash. If you look at the data, you can see that the banks have not, the amount of the financial markets, that the amount of money that was lost in that period of time has still not been recovered. So there hasn't even been a recovery. Then we had COVID crisis, which was basically the end of QE, and that was when we're rebounding back to another collapse, so to speak, because QE was failing, and they just blamed it on the COVID crisis. So that even brought us even further down, caused hyperinflation. 200 to 300%, I believe, is what we're seeing. Everything in Europe, in this part of Europe, doubled, from what I understand. That's what everybody has said. In America, everything has doubled and almost tripled since the beginning of the COVID crisis. So I mean, it's a matter of, not only has the dollar deflated, the currency, cost of goods has gone up, the quality has gone down, but more importantly, like I said, the markets have not recovered. So you have less that you can buy with your currency, with your fiat. You have lower quality goods and services, and it costs 2 to 3 times as much. And not only that, but you have less money to buy things. And the money that you put into investments is not paying back, even though it may pay 20, 30% ROI. That's just enough to cover the inflation from the dollar devaluation. That's why gold is $4,000 an ounce, or hit $4,000 an ounce. Silver hit $50 an ounce. That's why Bitcoin hit $130,000 a coin. This is because of the hyperinflation. This is the realized inflation. You can see it through the financial markets, but I digress. Adam, if you want to add anything.
So Ben Shapiro was in hot water for saying, if you can't afford to live where you grew up, that's an entitled attitude move. Then he says, and again, to some extent, sure. To the other extent, he said, and then to the other extent, I can understand why that riles people up. It should. Then he says, it's not the system, it's you. Now, the problem is, as we've covered, it actually is the system. This is not a real system. This is not a normal system. This is absolutely a counterfeit system. The entire economic design is to extract, to suppress your wages, to inflate the assets. So take personal responsibility. Sure, look, practically do the best you can, seize your personal responsibility, right? This is leadership. But also macro, recognize that there is a macro level plunder going on, and this message of don't blame the system, it's a smokescreen. The modern state attacks the individual, liberty, sovereignty, power across every vector: inflation, taxation, real estate scarcity, migration policies, regulatory capture, money laundering, bureaucrats, inefficiencies as a policy. The point is that you may be struggling, and struggle exists, but politics adds misery to your strife, and their system is predatory by design. We're talking about 50-year mortgages. Don't get a 50-year mortgage, certainly. Renting is better in that case because you're not covering the maintenance and you don't have such high responsibilities. Buying effectively becomes a trap. Home ownership is now a political instrument, not a social good. Mm-hmm. Cities are no longer communities, but platforms for capital extraction. The American dream is a debt-based hallucination. A 50-year mortgage means you will not pay it off during your productive years. You're indebted to the bank, debt slavery for life. Homes are becoming multi-generational debt obligations, just like feudal land rents. You're not building equity, you're stabilizing the banking system, which is very unstable and in the process of collapse. And if it does collapse, if you've taken out a loan for $500,000 on your house and a crisis occurs, who knows how much that's going to drop? You still owe the full amount on that loan.
Correct. We saw that in 08. We saw that in '08. People that had loans out, banks went insolvent, and you just basically got a new guarantor. And I've heard even horror stories where people basically, the banks went out of business. They didn't know who to send the checks to. And come to find out, like, they're like, okay, well, they call them like a year later after it's been bought. They're like, yeah, you owe us 12 months of payments. I need that payment up front plus late fees and penalties and interest. It has happened. Yes. It happened in '08. And it can happen again.
So your goal should be independence, sovereignty, self-ownership. But with a 50-year mortgage, it's none of those things. It's dependence. We are being priced out of cities, and to support that, they are replacing these populations with imported foreigners. They are undercutting labor. Cheaper labor is a good thing, right? Prices are coming down. No, they're not going down because the aggregate demand is rising way more than the aggregate supply. Economics 101, you take a little chart, you do a supply and demand, and sorry, it's mirrored. And if the demand is going higher, is moving higher faster than supply, prices increase. And they're undercutting your labor, suppressing it. Rents are going up, and this is being done with political loyalty. Vote for us. We're going to steal more from these people via higher taxation and inflation and give it to you. So they're getting subsidized in order to subvert and undermine you and replace you. The result is this is a perfect trifecta for the regime, for extraction, for plunder. Urban centers are no longer being representative of the nation. This is cosmopolitanism. The serfdom is not only economic, it is, but it's demographic too. The subpoints of this is, of course, you will own nothing. You will own nothing and pay forever. And you probably won't be too happy about it. You can rent things, sure, but the point is you're paying forever, and you're paying the banks, and these banks are not are not good people, certainly. No. You're not being whipped, but you have these electronic shackles where they can turn up at your house, take your stuff. Digital ID, right? They're pushing you. What's the solution? I mean, in my Telegram groups, which is my main social place, everyone's talking about, look, the goal, the dream, the idea is homesteading is going to be better. I want to own my own land, not part of the cities. And I understand I need a good vehicle. I need to pay for the land. I want to get some guns. I want to be able to afford things. So I do need a job right now, but I'd so much rather not engage in their system because the house always wins. And just the deck is completely stacked against me. And I think one of the worst parts about it is that they kind of moralize it as a good thing. And they say, aren't you happy that we're doing all this for you? It's progress, don't you know? And you're wrong, you're evil, you should be demonized for opposing this progress. And it's just like, man, these people suck so hard.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like the currency is definitely the shackles in which we live under. So when you have central banks and you have governments that control that, you no longer are sovereign. You know what I mean? So it is what it is. We lose our sovereignty due to government involvement in the currency and fiat. And even Thomas Jefferson talked about this. It was avidly against central banking schemes, central banking system. So.
Quote from
a very smart man. Yeah.
Vladimir Lenin, also a very smart man. Establishing a central bank is 90% of the way to communism. Again, 100%. I talked about trajectories. If you have a central bank, you have this counterfeit system where you are able to harm the masses at their expense for the ruling class, and it's just extraction and plunder. And then with liberal democracy, they have a number of other vectors. And again, it's the moralizing. I mean, I tell some people, some people meet me, they say, what do you do for a living? What are you doing in this country? And they ask some questions, and I try not to answer too much, but when they ask, and they say, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is happening in a democracy. I say, what are you talking about? They say, well, we live in a democracy, don't we? I say, do we? Yeah, we do actually. But what does that mean? It means that it's all just mind control. It doesn't mean anything. You are being ruled by evil people who hate you, who have every incentive to plunder society and de-civilize it at your expense for their benefit, and that's what's going on. And the trajectory is progressive. This is the thing. If someone were to come to your house, open the door, say, hello, we're from the government, give me $10. And you say, why? And they say, give me $1,000, give me $10,000. Why? No, I don't want it. But if they're inflating it progressively, and the interest rates just kind of go up, and the money just kind of goes down, and you're just not, we're not even going to lower your income, but you're not getting a raise. And the raise that you are getting is not so much. In Bulgaria, there's a bunch of corruption going on in the government, and rule of law and whatever. I'm not actually too familiar with it. But the point is that the European Union has frozen the money to the country, like hundreds of millions, however much. 200 million, I think, is what I read. And so the government are like, oh no, this is our money because we're pocketing so much of it. We really want that money. So they're raising taxes. It's like, all right, damn, to tax, a slap in the face. The employer for a friend of mine, instead of they're getting this amount, I think about a quarter or an eighth, somewhere more than 10% is increase in tax. That's a slap in the face. Inflation, it's a slow bleed. It hurts, and it begins to hurt more and more and more as the trajectory goes and goes. Tax, slap in the face, pretty unpopular. Inflation is tomorrow's problem, and you can't see it directly. Instead of it being, there's a saying out here, I don't know if it's a commonplace saying, but certainly this is my introduction to the country, that here in Bulgaria, there's something known as tracksuit corruption. It's plain, it's in the face, they slap you, fair enough. In the West, with these systems of extraction and plunder, they're in a nice suit and tie, they're smiling, they say this is for your own benefit, this is for your interest. Hey, you can't afford a 30-year mortgage? No worries, I'll give you one for 50 years. This is what sleazy car salesmen do as well. Oh, you can't afford the car payment?
That's where it started, was in the car sales. Yeah, but go ahead.
And so that they do it and they smile, and people say, thank you. And don't we live in such an advanced place where and they don't seem to notice that these people hate you. They're doing it to hurt you because it's not in a tracksuit. They dress nice. They got a nice watch. Listen, if you told a person in the 1950s that today a house would cost most of your income, over 50%, college would take a lifetime to repay, families could barely make do, even with mom working, and we were locked in endless wars and governments paralyzed by bureaucracy and crises, they would say, oh my goodness, we lost the Cold War.
Yeah, pretty much. I totally agree. It's just debt slavery. Like I said, this is the end game for central banking schemes, for the whole central banking system that was established. This is the end game. If you go back to the first time, I'm just going to speak from an American perspective. You can speak from the London perspective if you want to. But in America, the first time they started a central bank, or at least tried it, it resulted in a major recession shortly after the United States. They first tried to do a central banking scheme, and it ended in failure. And then they removed it, and then they went back to regular banking system that they had before, pre-colonial. And the economy grew again. Let me look up. I think it was like 17. I'm going to look up the first recession in the United States. Let me look it up real quick. It was like 1789 or something. It was also partially due to the cause of the war, so to speak. So They point to a recession from 1797 to 1798, or even earlier, triggered by credit expansion and investment bubble that affected the entire economy. The first official major financial crisis was the Panic of 1819, and this was again when they tried to implement a central bank in the United States. So every time that they've tried to implement a central banking scheme in the United States, it's always ended in failure. And Gonzalo Lira has said, Gonzalo Lira CRP archive says to enjoy the decline. So it is what it is. Anything you want to add there, Adam?
It is a scheme, central banking scheme. This is Austrian economics is the accurate, valid description of kind of the causal laws of scarcity, supply, demand of economics, and it's kind of tier one. If the foundations of your economic model is not built on tier one on Austrian economics, you have flawed assumptions. So Keynesianism does not believe in tier one Austrian economics. It's its own tier one, which says if we just keep spending, if we just stimulate aggregate demand, things will get better. That's the crux of it. We can spend when we've got money, and then we can spend when we don't have money, and when we've got money, we'll just get more back in because the income goes, the cash flow, which doesn't work, of course, because it will get stolen by the government and laundered into politicians and go. So Austrian economics says quite simply, when supply meets demand, markets clear. When you introduce artificial mechanisms like central banking, you are pulling it. You're not allowing the equilibrium position where markets clear. That's all equilibrium is. What you're doing is you're pulling at the strings of reality. And if anyone's ever pulled a guitar string, it snaps back. A rubber band, it snaps back. So when it snaps back, things happen. So by distorting the market, through artificial credit lines, through fractional reserve banking, through politicking and government programs and government policies, it is by distorting the market, the free market, that you are inducing these crises as a deliberate, as conscious, as an inevitable policy outcome.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the reality is like I said, I mean, I'll even point it here. I'm going to give you guys some historical facts here with the United States and central banking systems. So you remember what I said? The first major recession was in 1798 to around that time. The first attempt to a central bank was the first bank of the United States from 1791 to 1811. And the result was, like I said, a financial crisis in the early 19th century, so 1798 to 1811, and then they just dissolved it. And then they tried to start a second central bank in 1816 to 1836. What did that result in? Financial panic of what was it, 1837, something like that. So sure, like 1837 resulted in a financial recession, major recession, and then there was the panic in 1907. That was the result. So 1837, 1913, it's a period without central bank, characterized by financial instability leading to events of the panic of 1907. But it was a result of it was basically a result of all the different mechanisms and things that they put into place from the second time they started a central bank that led to it. So they blamed it on the fact that there was no central bank, but the central bank led to the devaluation of the dollar and the financial markets that led up to a panic of 1907. Then the Federal Reserve was established, the act in 1913. And then what happened after 1913? There was something that happened there in 1939. I don't know if you remember that. It's kind of mentioned once in a while in economics. What happened in 1939?
That was September 1939. There was beginning of World War One. World War Two. 1914, World War One. 1939 was World War Two, but Pearl Harbor was 1941. So
right.
What happened in
what
the USA
happened between that period?
There was the
during
Great
that
Depression,
period.
which was 1929, and lasted through the 30s.
Yeah, and it happened. It happened shortly after a central bank was established. It was one of the worst. And the thing is that the first bank in the United States and the second bank in the United States wasn't as evasive in the economy and banking. When they established the official Federal Reserve System, like the first two were kind of like, we're going to trial a central banking scheme. It failed both times, so we're going to dissolve it. But now they went full retard and full economic retard and said, oh, well, let's go ahead and implement a actual full-scale socialist central banking system. And it resulted in the Great Depression.
And it's not just it's not just money, so crisis. There was a drought. I think it was like a global drought, because
that was part of it as well. Yes.
Serious problem in Ukraine and the US. Yeah. There was a drought, so the drought, was a primary driver, which you need some kind of trigger for the crisis, but correct. The crisis is either exacerbated by or indeed created because of malinvestment, cheap credit, distortion, correct. And this is facilitated because this is not money. This is peasant money that you and I have to use because we don't have $52 million in a bank account somewhere offshore
or assets,
Swiss managers.
Assets. Yeah,
right.
Gold, silver,
most money, but again, the assets, a lot of them, is owned by lines of credit, and the lines of credit are in this banking, in the financial system. And what is that? Because everything's so abstract. That's how these schemes are allowed to occur. If someone said to you, hey, we're going to go fight in Afghanistan, you need to pay $500 a month, $1,000 a month so that we can fight in Afghanistan, support our troops. You say, well, no, I don't have that money. I don't think that's a good use of my money. I'm not going to give you my money to go fight a foreign war. I don't think it's justified. Well, they don't have to ask you permission. They don't even have to go send men round to your house with guns saying, give me $10,000. They just print the money and do it anyway. It's because of these disconnections, because of this, the financial system is abstract, because we can just print the money or tax it. Coercion, distortion, artificial, fiat. Fiat, by the way, it doesn't mean paper money. It means by decree. In other words, again, that you don't have to mine some material, make something, create some value. Now I've got some value, something intrinsic, which means when they go to spend it, you can see it. It's apparent. It's readily evident. They don't even need to come and tax you. In the story of Robinhood, he goes around. He wasn't stealing from the rich to give to the poor. Nope, that is not what happened. He went around taking the money back from the tax collectors and returning that to the masses. That's why he's such a heroic individual. That's not even going on because they don't have to go and collect money from your front door. They just print it. And there's $38 trillion in debt in the USA, and that's not going down. I was listening to a video from 2-3 years ago, and they say, oh, the USA is $30 trillion in debt. Well, now it's 38 trillion, I think. And every 3 months or so, 4 months, it's going up another trillion. Trillions of dollars in debt. But it doesn't matter because of this exuberant privilege, because of these systems of super imperialism.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much in a nutshell, it's the sad reality is that even if they were to repeal the and dismantle the central banking scheme and IMF and all these different mechanisms, the banksters will eventually just find a way to steal money again. So you can only do so much. They, like I said, they had the Glass-Steagall Act that prevented another collapse and panic. And the first thing that Slick Willie did when he got into office is this is a group effort, by the way, both the GOP and the Democrats repealed the Glass-Steagall Act. Yeah, Uniparty, and they repealed it together collectively. and contributed to the CDO crisis. I don't think it was the main factor. It was partially
There's technology, there's
the trigger.
deregulations, there's
Yeah.
all sorts of things. Yeah.
But they're doing the same thing. Trump's doing the same thing. Like I said, Obama was the food stamp president. I said Trump's going to be the UBI president. And we're going to see that very soon. We're going to see that very soon. He's not going to give food stamps. He's going to give cash. He's going to be like, I gotta stimulate the economy, the New Deal. So I'm going to inject money directly through giving you free money because I am the UBI president and Bubba and bubbles are occurring. So to prevent those bubbles from occurring, I will give you free cash, and you will spend it and create economic growth to create bigger bubbles like the bubbles we're in right now.
That was last week. The US government's broke. They're introducing tariffs. Trump said on the 9th of November, a dividend of at least $2,000 a person, not including rich people, will be paid to everyone. $2,000. Thanks. How much are you taxing me? Just tax me less. Just give me a tax break.
That's it. That's the libertarian approach is basically just lower taxes and ease some regulation.
And lower taxes, especially in the USA where you have this progressive tax system. You say, oh, we're going to give everyone $2,000 except for just raise
socialism. Who's got to pay that? Taxpayers got to pay that. Versus if you alleviate taxes, it creates capital for businesses and small businesses as well as
even if you just
individuals.
Raise the threshold for income tax. Hey, we don't need so much money from you directly. If you're making less than, I don't know the bands in America. I don't even know how much is a lot. But if you're making less than $30,000, no income tax. 50,000, less income tax. I don't know. But yeah,
personal exemption I think is like 15,000 right now, maybe 16,000. So if you make that, but if you're making that, you're not able to even afford an apartment in America. So it's
sure.
a mute issue.
Which is why if you move up to 20,000, you're putting a lot more money in these people's pockets, in the poorest people.
100%.
I'd rather they just get rid of all that. And the thing about the tax code, the tax system, the reason it's not a flat tax, well, there's many reasons. Oh, it's progressive. A flat tax is actually sometimes harder to evade at the highest levels because it's just like, 100%. No,
that's how it is here in Georgia.
There's all these loopholes, all these things that can be done in order to avoid these taxes. Rich people don't pay taxes. The ultra rich don't pay taxes, and the poorest people still pay taxes.
And a progressive system, yes.
But they still pay indirect taxes, fuel duty. I mean, in Britain, they're now saying we're going to. Right, we talked a lot about finance, and just to end it off, finance control. So there's been a big push, this communist push for green, get an electric car so you're more dependent on the grid. They want to introduce pay per mile, pay per kilometer. We're going to monitor directly how much you're driving, and you will pay us a tax for every mile you go. Because people aren't paying as much in fuel anymore. Fuel duties are falling. We're broke. We want the money to go into our pockets and that of our friends and inflate things. And so we're going to increase surveillance and we're going to extract and plunder, and you're going to be happy for it, because what are you going to do? You're going to leave? My advice in the USA, I don't know. My advice in the UK and Germany is, yeah, I would leave. Sorry. And I understand why you don't want to. But and you can completely disagree with me. You can say, no, this is like, I've been here for 3,000 years. I'm going to fight for this. Okay, best of luck. But it's not easy. It's going to hurt. It's going to be very painful. It is very painful. And I say this because in Germany, someone posted on X, oh, these government workers are parasites. It got a few hundred views. Anyway, the police raided his home, seized his phone, took biometrics, demanded DNA, and warned, you are now under surveillance. At dawn, for some not even naughty words on the internet, for just saying, oh, these government workers are parasites. And then they proved him right. So it's terrible out there. Best of luck. Don't get a 50-year mortgage.
No, I advise not. I mean, I'm not giving financial advice, but me personally, I would not do that. I mean, it's better to rent, keep your money in hard assets and different types of investments because the ROI will pay much more substantially than I think a mortgage would. And the thing is with mortgages, it requires upkeep. I mean, just insurance premiums go up every year. I don't know what the percentage was in Florida alone, but I believe within a 10-year period, it's probably doubled. So from 2000, from 2005 to 2025, I'm sure it's doubled the insurance premium cost, maybe even tripled. So I mean that's just 20 years. So you add 50 years, it's quadruple. You can imagine paying higher premiums and the maintenance and upkeep. Because like I said, with inflation, so does the cost to build for building materials, for labor, all that stuff increases as well. So it's all relative. So I mean, if anything, buy some property that you want to consider to retire in, and if anything, the equity alone, the price of that property could go up. You could sell it and then buy a house or whatever you want to do, or leave the country. But I mean, eventually you could just build a house on it later, and just with your savings and pension and things of that nature. I would never
Just
buy.
very quickly
Yeah,
on moving.
yeah,
Go where? Like go to some third world crap hole. Oh, Palantir surveillance is
yes,
coming. Like there's it. This is why I'm not saying do move. Fight for where you are if that's what you want. The UK, I'd say move. It's lost, and I think it's important that wherever you're living, it's do everything you can to not lose it, but also my belief is it's a losing battle. But what do you do with that? I don't know. I don't know. Try not to play their game, but do it however you can. The more you can do off the books, agorism, bartering, homesteading, growing your own food in your garden, paying in cash, paying in the walnuts you grow in your garden, right, to your neighbor who's giving you something else, or he's fixing your electrical, whatever, or you're doing that yourself. That's the best practical advice I can immediately think of. But really, you gotta work as hard as you can to make as much money you can so that you can try and build some kind of safety net sovereignty for yourself. And it's hard.
yeah, 100%. I agree with you through and through. Very good podcast. Thanks guys for watching. Those that stayed the entire time. Remember, add comments, like anything, any questions you have, make suggestions for future podcasts, definitely in the comment section of Liberty Rising Group, as well as here at Straight Talk Podcast. Professor Red Pill, go to locals. Rumble 3 gets you $3 off your first month's membership, which makes it $1. And like I said, I post a lot of other content on there, my books on there, different types of benefits that you have on that particular channel. Plus, you're supporting me for paying for equipment, paying for live streaming, internets, things of that nature, so I can deliver future content. And like I said, share, like, subscribe, and come join us in the Telegram channel, and we could further the discussion there as well. That being said, thank you. Good night. Anything you want to add, Adam?
Thank you for
All
listening.
right, Pete. Yeah, definitely. Peace out, guys. And remember, don't blow bubbles.